Every great film should seem new, every time you see it. Welcome back to The Whole Pictures. Today I will show you the movie named Fear Street Part 1, 1994, Part 2, 1978 and Part 3, 1666. Before starting, please do subscribe this awesome channel. You will enjoy more incredible movies with us. Let's watch out and take care. The Fear Street trilogy is a new creature in a teenage horror fiction series written by American author R.L. Stine. The 3 films were shot back-to-back, and were released on a weekly basis. Each part focuses on a group of teenagers in a town called Shadyside, where the people of the town encounter evil and horror in a gruesome fight for survival. Teenagers who work to break the curse that has been over their town for hundreds of years. In the town of Shadyside, bookstore employee Heather Watkins is closing up shop at the mall. She gets a phone call from her friend Ryan Torres, who shows up to surprise her at the mall. Things go dark and quiet, and Heather finds herself stalked by a figure wearing a hoodie and a skull mask. She runs through the mall and attempts to fight him off, but he ultimately corners her in the middle of the mall and stabs her to death. He takes off the mask to reveal himself as Ryan, looking possessed and continuing to try and stab Heather until he is shot dead by Sheriff Nick Good. 7 other people are reported dead. The credits feature news reports and clippings of all the murders that have plagued Shadyside for decades, with many believing the town to harbor psychos, although the urban legend states that there is a witch by the name of Sarah Fier involved in everything. Elsewhere in Shadyside is Dina Johnson, who lives with her nerdy younger brother Josh and their father. They go to school together, and Dina notices tributes at Heather's locker. She goes to the bathroom and finds her friends Kate and Simon, along with a spray-painted message relating to Sarah Fier's curse. Kate offers Dina some drugs since she is selling pills in secret, but Dina declines. That night, a candlelight vigil is held for the victims of the mall slaying, joined by students from rival town Sunnyvale. Dina is upset to see her ex-girlfriend Samantha Fraser with a guy, Peter, who gropes her. The girls confront each other in private, with Dina being upset that Sam chose to live with her mother in Sunnyvale after her parents' divorce, especially because her mom doesn't like Dina due to their relationship. During the vigil, Peter makes snide comments about how there's always a tragedy happening in Shadyside, leading to a brawl between students from both schools. On the bus ride home, Peter, joined by Sam and one of his buddies, chases after the Shadyside bus to pelt them with junk. Dina opens the emergency exit to throw a cooler at the car until her nose starts bleeding. She drops the cooler on the car, causing Peter to crash nearby in the woods. Sam gets out, injured, and then sees flashes of some kind of satanic ritual. She is later taken to the hospital. All the students then claim that the car crash was just an accident to spare anyone from getting in trouble. The next night, Dina tries to call for Sam's hospital room, but her mom refuses to let Dina talk to her. She hears a ringing at the door and looks across the street to see the same skull mask figure standing outside, believing it to be Peter playing a prank. Meanwhile, Kate and Simon are babysitting 2 girls when they also seem to encounter Skull Mask. Dina goes to Kate and claims that it's Peter, so they go to the hospital themselves to confront Sam and tell her to call Peter off. Sam claims that Peter has been there all night, which leads to Dina and Sam having an argument before Peter is impaled by Skull Mask. He kills 2 other hospital employees before the teens flee from the hospital. The group tries to report the attack to Sheriff Good, but he thinks it's just another prank, since they have been getting calls about a copycat killer all weekend. Dina manages to grab officer's gun off him before leaving. Outside, Simon has an encounter with a young woman, Ruby Lane, who is singing an old tune. Simon approaches her and is slashed with a razor. Ruby attempts to attack Simon until Dina shoots Ruby down. But it doesn't kill her and she heals herself. They run back to the Johnson house, where Josh recognizes her as Ruby Lane, because he has done his research on all the murders in Shadyside. Ruby killed her boyfriend, friends, and then herself decades earlier. He also has info on other killers from Shadyside, such as a killer at Camp Nightwing, a milkman that killed housewives, a deformed boy who murdered his brothers, and a grifter killing random people in town. All of it connects to Sarah Fier, who was hanged for witchcraft in 1666, but cut off her cursed hand and left it in the town to reach from beyond the grave, and claim victims. The group goes to the site of the crash, where they discover that it is the grave of Sarah Fier. Sam touched the grave and saw visions, which is why they are facing the spirits of those previously possessed by Sarah. They attempt to bury Sarah's bones, only to be pursued by the Camp Nightwing killer. It turns out that since Sam earlier coughed blood on Simon's shirt, they are drawn to them because of Sarah's blood. The teens then go to the high school where they change clothes and plot to trap the spirits. Dina and Sam briefly hook up again before Ruby, Skull Mask, and Camp Nightwing Killer make their returns. The teens trap them in a room rigged to blow, and the room explodes, seemingly burning the killers to death. Unfortunately, they begin to regenerate, forcing the teens to run again. The group realizes that the killers want Sam, and from Josh's old clippings, he finds that there was a survivor of the Camp Nightwing murders called C. Berman, who was apparently dead for 2 minutes before being revived, and it allowed her to escape the murders. The teens try calling her but only get her answering machine. They then head to a supermarket, where they plan to have Sam die through an overdose of Kate's drugs before reviving her. The 3 killers make their appearance soon enough, with Dina trying to help Sam while the other 3 run. Sam vomits the pills before it can work. Skull Mask attacks Kate and stabs her in the gut before putting her head through a bread slicer. While Camp Nightwing Killer drives an axe into Simon's skull. Just before the killers can get the rest of them, Dina drowns Sam in a tank, causing the killers to disappear. Dina and Josh jam EpiPens into Sam's body until she finally wakes up. The survivors give their account to Sheriff Good, who thinks Kate and Simon were behind the murders, but Dina, Josh, and Sam defend them as their friends. When Sam's mom goes to pick her up, Sam defiantly kisses Dina in front of her mom and plans to continue their relationship. Dina and Sam hang out at home that night. Dina goes to answer the phone and hears the voice of C. Berman. She is surprised to know that Dina is alive because, according to Berman, there is no stopping the witch. Dina turns around to find a now possessed Sam having stabbed her. After a struggle, Dina subdues Sam and ties her up just as Josh runs back upstairs. Dina then looks at Sam and vows to bring her back, all while Sam roars at her. Now, Dina and Josh must figure out to do. We know that we're going back to 1978 in Fear Street Part 2, a summer camp, Camp Nightwing. C. Berman watches the news reports of the recent slayings in Shadyside, with the news still suspecting Kate and Simon as the prime culprits. She hears a noise from the kitchen and finds Dina climbing in through the window. Berman nearly attacks Dina until she explains that she is the girl that Berman called earlier. Dina brings Berman outside with Josh to show them that they have Sam tied up in the trunk of their car since she is still possessed. Although Berman initially refuses to help, Dina pleads with her until she relents. Berman brings them back into the house to tell them the story about how she survived her own encounter with Sarah Fier. 1978, young Ziggy Berman is running through the woods of Camp Nightwing, when she is attacked by a Sunnyvale camper named Sheila and her cohorts, because Ziggy stole some money from their cabin, and they taunt her by saying she is possessed by Sarah Fier. Counselors Will Good and Kurt come to break things up, as Sheila starts to burn Ziggy's arm with a lighter. Knowing that Ziggy already has a history with causing problems, Will orders her to go call her mom to pick her up, but first she goes to the nurse to tend to her wound. Meanwhile, Ziggy's older sister Cindy is working as a counselor there with her boyfriend Tommy Slater, having to deal with her former friend Alice and her boyfriend Arnie doing drugs and having sex. Cindy and Alice were friends until Cindy ratted out Alice for a crime they committed when they were younger. Ziggy goes to the office of Nurse Mary Lane, mother of previous Shadyside killer Ruby. She is haunted by the fact that her daughter killed her friends and then herself. Mary insinuates that some of the murders were justified as she wraps the bandage around Ziggy's arm too tightly. Afterwards, Ziggy meets up with Cindy, and they argue as Cindy talks about wanting to leave Shadyside, but Ziggy says nobody gets out of there. More bickering ensues, and Cindy calls Ziggy a monster. Cindy is scrubbing moss off the floors in an outhouse with Tommy when they are found by Mary. Nurse Mary Lane approaches Tommy with a knife and says, "I'm sorry, but I can't save you. I saw your name, I saw the wall. One way or another, you're going to die tonight." She tries to attack Tommy, but he is able to push her off of him and knock her out. Tommy is also injured in the back of the head. Mary is taken to the hospital, with people assuming she is just as crazy as her daughter was. At the scene is young Nick Good, whose father was sheriff before his death, and everyone in town knows Nick is heir apparent to succeed him. The campers and counselors are preparing for a color war that night. Ziggy is preparing for a revenge prank against Sheila after finding that she and her friends wrote nasty things about her in her room. Cindy joins Tommy, Alice, and Arnie as they go into Mary's office to get what they think are hard drugs, but is really just Tylenol. All the while, Tommy starts to feel unwell. Alice finds Mary's diary, which contains a map of the area, as well as the legend of the witch, which states that if Sarah's hand is reunited with her body, the curse will come to an end. The map leads them to Sarah's old home, going underground to the caverns where the names of previous killers under Sarah's influence are carved into stone. Cindy and Alice then find Tommy's name on there. Arnie approaches Tommy, thinking he is just really high, but Tommy grabs an axe off the wall and splits Arnie's face open in front of the girls. The two run and make it far enough to cause rocks to collapse and seemingly trap Tommy, but he manages to make his escape while Cindy and Alice are still trapped down there. Nick helps Ziggy prank Sheila by filling a bucket full of creepy bugs, luring her to the outhouse under the impression that Will is asking her to join her. They pull the bucket and dump the bugs on her before trapping her in the outhouse. Not far away, a Shadyside camper named Jeremy is brutally murdered by Tommy. Ziggy and Nick start to kiss until they hear screams from campers who discover Jeremy's remains. The counselors gather all the remaining campers in the outhouse. Tommy also goes after Kurt's girlfriend Joan, hacking her to death after she has sex with Kurt, and then he proceeds to go after more innocent campers left alone. Cindy and Alice continue to try and make their way out of the caverns. They come across what looks like a gigantic rotting beating organ. Alice touches it and sees visions of all of Sarah's previous killers, even seeing a vision of a dead Cindy and other victims of the murders. Alice gets injured when she falls over and a bone pops out of her leg. Cindy tends to her wounds, and the girls admit things to each other. Cindy admits to having snitched on Alice to save her skin, while Alice tells Cindy that she had slashed her wrists to cope with her dismal home life. Ziggy remembers Sheila is in the outhouse and goes to find her along with another counselor named Gary. Sheila attacks Ziggy but then has her lights knocked out by Ziggy. Cindy and Alice manage to find out that there is an exit above them when Cindy finds the same moss from the outhouse. They call out for help, and Ziggy finds them. As she and Gary try pulling Alice out first, Tommy comes and decapitates Gary, causing them to drop Alice while Ziggy makes a run for it. She is found by Nick, who tries to get her to safety, until Tommy comes and attacks. He slashes at Nick's leg while Ziggy runs and sees that she has missed the bus taking the other campers and counselors to safety. Cindy and Alice manage to find a way around that leads them to the mess hall. Ziggy is there while Tommy goes after her, attacking her before she wraps the burlap sack around his head, that he later wears as a ghost. Cindy manages to break free from the cellar, and stabs Tommy repeatedly until he is dead, saving her sister. The girls reconcile and reaffirm their love for one another. Alice emerges with Sarah's skeletal hand, and they plan to bring the hand back to her body, until Ziggy gets a nosebleed and drips on the hand. This causes her to see a vision of Sarah, as well as reanimate Tommy's corpse back to life. Just before the girls head out, Tommy slashes Alice's throat, killing her. Cindy beheads him with a shovel as the two sisters run. Ziggy and Cindy make it to the hanging tree where Sarah died, but they are soon faced by Tommy, Ruby Lane, the milkman Harry Rooker, and masked child killer Billy Barker. Just as the girls try to put the hand in the ground, the killers get closer. Cindy orders Ziggy to make a run for it while she fights off Tommy. Unfortunately, Tommy gets the upper hand and begins hacking Cindy to death, while the milkman stabs Ziggy in the gut repeatedly. The killers vanish, and the sisters die side by side. Nick shows up and manages to revive Ziggy with CPR, but Cindy is gone. In the present, Berman reveals that she was Ziggy, as her real name is Christine. Although she told Nick that the curse was real, he couldn't back up her claims due to fears that it would compromise his future as sheriff, so he just tells authorities that Tommy went crazy. Christine still insists that there is no way to defeat Sarah, but Dina and Josh ask her if Sarah's hand is still under the hanging tree. It is, as the Shadyside Mall is now where Camp Nightwing used to be. While the two are doing this, Christine attempts to contact Nick. Dina then takes the hand to Sarah's grave in the woods, but as she does so, she finds herself back in 1666, where she is now Sarah. The historical truth in the final part: 3 Fear Street, 1666. Thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing and turn on notification for more videos just like this. Leave a like, it really helps to grow the channel.